The majority of scholars don't think that the Pastoral Epistles were written by Paul. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the majority of scholars think that 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus were not written by Paul. They were written by somebody pretending to be Paul decades after his death, toward the end of the 1st century CE or the beginning of the 2nd century CE. And there are a number of reasons for thinking this, both external and internal. Externally, some very important early manuscripts omit the Pastoral Epistles. Chester Beatty's P46, our earliest manuscript that gathers together all the Pauline epistles, omits the Pastoral Epistles. Codex Vaticanus, our second earliest manuscript that contains the entire New Testament, omits the Pastoral Epistles. Tatian, the one who put together the Diatessaron, the Harmony of the Gospels, didn't think they were all authentic. Marcion, who was widely rejected as a heretic in the middle of the 2nd century CE, was the original Paul Stan. His entire canon was the Pauline epistles and a version of Luke, and he omitted the Pastoral Epistles. So there was skepticism, there was doubt about the authenticity of the Pastoral Epistles within the early church. However, it was a minority view. The majority of Christians accepted them as authentic, and by the time a canon started to firm up in the 4th century CE, they coasted quite easily into canonicity. Internally, the concerns are even greater. The biggest concern is that the style and the content of the Pastoral Epistles not only does not fit with the genuine Pauline epistles, it directly conflicts with it in many places. For instance, the language is very, very different. And if you look at the terminology that is unique to the Pastoral Epistles, that is nowhere found in the genuine Pauline epistles, their usage tends to concentrate in the literature published toward the end of the 1st century CE and the beginning of the 2nd century CE, after Paul's death. It also seems to be concerned with institutional issues of a much more developed Christian church, far more developed than what we see in the genuine Pauline epistles, something that we might expect at the end of the 1st century CE or the beginning of the 2nd century CE. We also have ideology that conflicts with Paul's. For instance, there's no concern for the soma, the body, that we find all over the genuine Pauline epistles. The idea of being in Christ is not this metaphysical, soteriological framework. It basically just means being a Christian in the Pastoral Epistles. Women are treated very differently in the Pastoral Epistles. It is a much more misogynistic set of texts, and women are said to find salvation through childbirth. But in the genuine Pauline epistles, Paul thought Jesus was coming back too quickly for anyone to worry about getting pregnant. Procreation was not a concern. In fact, he wanted everybody to be celibate. That's not in the Pastoral Epistles. So there are a number of concerns that lead the majority of scholars to conclude this. And obviously, there are going to be apologists and others who are intuitively motivated to defend the Pauline authorship of the Pastoral Epistles, but their arguments do not convince the majority of scholars. And we actually have some data on this. A while ago, a scholar named Paul Foster published a paper on the authorship of 2 Thessalonians, and as part of that, he included an informal survey that he conducted at a conference of the British New Testament Society. And Peter Gurry put together a handy little illustration of the results of that survey. And when you look at the Pastoral Epistles, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus, you'll see that about 55% of the respondents said Paul was not the author. About another 20 to 25% said, we're not sure. And only about another 20 to 25% said they believed that Paul was the author of the Pastoral Epistles. And the British New Testament Society skews a little more conservatively than many other scholars do. And so if you expanded the scope of this survey to the thousands of other New Testament scholars out there, I think you would see the numbers go up. And I'm actually in the process of conducting just such a survey right now. So while there will no doubt be objections to this video from folks who have been convinced by their own arguments, the majority of scholars continue to believe that the Pastoral Epistles were not written by Paul. They were written by someone pretending to be Paul decades after his death. And the fit for this video has been Green Lantern.